The Charleston harbor gleamed like scattered diamonds under the afternoon sun as Helena Ashford stood on the deck of the merchant vessel Serafina, watching the bustling port fade into the distance. The salty breeze carried the scent of magnolias from the Carolina coast, mixing with the tar and rope of the ship. At 19, Helena possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads in drawing rooms and harbors alike. Golden hair that caught sunlight like spun silk, and emerald eyes that held both intelligence and determination. But today, those eyes reflected something deeper, the weight of responsibility. "Miss Ashford, your father would be proud," said Captain Morrison, approaching with his weathered hands clasped behind his back. The Serafina had been her father's pride, a vessel that had brought prosperity to their shipping company for over a decade. Now, with Thomas Ashford's sudden death from fever, the burden of the family business rested squarely on Helena's shoulders. "I pray you're right, Captain," Helena replied, her voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty in her chest. The ship's hold was filled with precious cargo, cotton, tobacco, and indigo bound for European markets. This voyage represented more than trade. It was her chance to prove that a woman could command respect in a man's world, that the Ashford name would not crumble with her father's passing. The first 2 days at sea passed without incident. Helena spent her time reviewing manifests, studying navigation charts, and learning the intricate details of maritime commerce that her father had shielded her from during his lifetime. The crew, initially skeptical of taking orders from a young woman, began to warm to her practical approach and genuine concern for their welfare. But on the third night, everything changed. Helena woke to the violent rocking of the ship and the sound of splintering wood. The storm had come from nowhere, transforming the calm Atlantic into a writhing beast of towering waves and shrieking wind. Rain lashed against her cabin windows like bullets, and the ship groaned under the assault of nature's fury. "All hands on deck!" Captain Morrison's voice boomed above the tempest as Helena struggled to dress. The floor tilted at impossible angles, sending her belongings sliding across the cabin. When she finally made it topside, the scene was chaos incarnate. The crew fought desperately against the storm, their faces illuminated by flashes of lightning that revealed walls of water rising like mountains around them. The mainmast had cracked, its rigging whipping dangerously in the gale. Helena grabbed a rope, her expensive dress already soaked through, and joined the battle against the elements. "The hull's been breached," shouted the first mate, his words nearly lost in the roar of wind and water. "We're taking on water faster than we can pump it out." Helena's heart sank as she realized the terrible truth. The Serafina was dying. Around her, seasoned sailors worked with the desperation of men who knew their fate. But even as fear clawed at her throat, Helena refused to give in to panic. If these were to be her final moments, she would face them with the dignity her father had taught her. Then, through the chaos of the storm, she saw them. Dark shapes moving through the mountainous waves, approaching with purpose that no merchant vessel could match in such conditions. Pirates. Even as her own ship foundered, predators circled like sharks, sensing blood in the water. Pirates off the starboard bow. The lookout's cry sent a chill through the crew that had nothing to do with the icy rain. Helena squinted through the storm, making out the silhouette of a ship that seemed to dance with the waves rather than fight them. Its black sails were barely visible against the storm-dark sky, but she could see figures moving on its deck with practiced efficiency. Captain Morrison appeared at her side, his face grim. "Miss Ashford, you must get to the boats. Now." But Helena stood frozen, watching the pirate ship draw closer. Even in her terror, she felt a strange fascination with the vessel's grace in the deadly waters. Whoever commanded that ship possessed skills that bordered on supernatural. The attack came swift and merciless. Grappling hooks flew through the storm, and dark figures swung aboard the Serafina like phantoms. The pirates moved with deadly precision, cutting down anyone who offered resistance. Helena watched in horror as men she had come to respect fell under cutlass and pistol shot. In the midst of the carnage, she caught sight of their leader, a tall figure in a dark coat that billowed behind him like wings. His face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the cold efficiency with which he directed his crew. This was no desperate ruffian, but a commander who wielded violence like an artist wielded a brush. "Please," Helena cried out as a pirate raised his blade toward a wounded sailor. "These men have families. Show mercy." The leader's head turned toward her voice, and for a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, their eyes met across the chaos. Even in the darkness and storm, Helena felt the weight of his gaze. penetrating, calculating, and strangely conflicted. Then the Serafina gave a final, shuddering groan and began her plunge toward the ocean floor. Helena found herself in the freezing water, fighting against the pull of the sinking ship and the mountainous waves that threatened to drag her down. Around her, debris and bodies floated in the storm-tossed sea. The pirates had vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving only destruction in their wake. As consciousness began to fade and the cold Atlantic claimed her strength, Helena's last coherent thought was a vow that burned hotter than the ice in her veins. She would survive this night, and she would make the pirate captain pay for every life lost. Even if it took her entire lifetime, she would have her revenge. The storm raged on, carrying away the wreckage of the Serafina and the dreams of the young woman who had dared to challenge the sea. But Helena Ashford was not so easily defeated. Somewhere in the darkness, salvation approached on gentle hands, and with it, a destiny that would prove more complex and dangerous than any revenge she could imagine. 5 years had transformed Helena Ashford from a naive merchant's daughter into something far more dangerous. The young woman who had once worried about proper tea service and ballroom etiquette was gone, replaced by someone harder, sharper, and driven by a purpose that burned like forge fire in her veins. The tavern in Nassau's harbor district reeked of rum, sweat, and desperation. Exactly the kind of place where information flowed as freely as cheap liquor. Helena sat in the shadows of a corner booth, her appearance carefully crafted to blend with the rough crowd. Gone were the silk gowns and delicate jewelry of her former life. Now she wore practical leather boots, dark breeches that allowed for quick movement, and a loose white shirt that concealed the pistol at her hip and the knife strapped to her thigh. Her golden hair was hidden beneath a weathered tricorn hat, and years of sun and sea had given her pale skin a warm bronze that spoke of countless hours spent learning to navigate by the stars. But it was her eyes that had changed the most. Those emerald depths now held a cold determination that made even hardened pirates look away when her gaze fell upon them. "Another rum, miss?" The barkeep's voice carried the lazy drawl of the Caribbean, where American pirates often sought refuge from the law. "Information," Helena replied quietly, sliding a gold coin across the scarred wooden table, "about a captain who sails under black flags. Tall man, commands his crew like he was born to it. They say he can navigate storms that would sink any other ship." The barkeep's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the gold, then narrowed with suspicion. "That be a dangerous question in these waters, miss. Captain Drake ain't the kind of man folks talk about lightly." Drake. After 5 years of searching, chasing rumors across the Caribbean and up the American coast, she finally had a name. Helena's heart hammered against her ribs, but her expression remained perfectly controlled. She had learned long ago that showing emotion was a luxury she couldn't afford in this world. "Where might one find this Captain Drake?" she asked, producing another coin. The barkeep glanced around nervously before leaning closer. "Word is he's been seen near the Outer Banks of North Carolina. But miss, if you're thinking of crossing him, you'd best think again. That man's got the devil's own luck, and his crew's loyal as hunting hounds. Many have tried to bring him down. None have lived to tell about it." Helena nodded her thanks and drained her cup, the cheap rum burning her throat. As she stood to leave, the barkeep caught her arm with surprising gentleness. "Whatever he done to you, girl, let it go. Revenge is a poison that'll kill you slower than any blade." If only he knew, Helena thought as she walked out into the humid Nassau night. Revenge wasn't poisoning her. It was the only thing keeping her alive. The journey to the Outer Banks took 3 weeks aboard a merchant vessel whose captain owed her a favor. Helena had spent the years since the Serafina's destruction building a network of contacts, learning to fight with both blade and pistol, and studying everything she could about piracy and naval warfare. She had transformed herself into a weapon with a single purpose: finding the man who had destroyed her life. The North Carolina coast was a maze of barrier islands, hidden coves, and treacherous shoals where countless ships had met their doom. It was perfect territory for a pirate who knew how to read the waters. Helena hired a small fishing boat and began her search, moving from island to island, tavern to tavern, following whispers and rumors like a bloodhound following a scent. On Ocracoke Island, she found what she was looking for. The Nemesis lay at anchor in a secluded cove, her black hull gleaming like polished obsidian in the moonlight. Even at rest, the ship radiated an aura of deadly grace that Helena remembered all too well from that terrible night 5 years ago. Her heart raced as memories flooded back. The storm, the attack, the cold water closing over her head. She spent 3 days observing the ship and its crew, learning their routines and habits. Captain Drake himself remained frustratingly elusive, coming and going at irregular intervals. But Helena was patient now, patience earned through years of preparation. She would wait as long as necessary for her chance. That chance came on the 4th night, when Drake finally appeared on deck. Helena's breath caught in her throat as she got her first clear look at her enemy. He was exactly as she remembered, tall and commanding, moving with the fluid grace of a man completely at home on a ship's deck. His dark hair was longer now, tied back with a leather cord, and his face bore new scars that spoke of battles fought and won. But it was his eyes that held her attention, pale blue, like ice on a winter morning, scanning the darkness with the alertness of a predator who knew he was always being hunted. He was beautiful and terrible at the same time, and Helena hated herself for noticing. Taking a deep breath, she checked her weapons one final time and began to move. She had spent months learning to climb rigging and move silently across ship decks. Tonight, all that training would be put to the test. The Nemesis was well guarded, but Helena had studied their patrol patterns. She slipped through the water like a ghost, using a small boat to approach from the ship's blind spot. Climbing the anchor chain was treacherous work, but her hands were strong and sure from years of practice. She had just pulled herself over the rail when a voice spoke from the shadows behind her. "I was wondering when you would finally make your move." Helena spun around, her hand flying to her pistol, but Captain Drake was already there, close enough that she could see the amusement dancing in those ice-blue eyes. How had he moved so silently? How had he known she was coming? 5 years, he continued conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather rather than her planned assassination. "You've been following my trail for 5 years. That's either admirable dedication or dangerous obsession. You murdered my crew," Helena snarled, her pistol now pointed directly at his heart. "You destroyed everything I had." Drake's expression grew serious, though he made no move to defend himself. "The Seraphina, you're Thomas Ashford's daughter." The fact that he remembered, that he knew her father's name, only fueled Helena's rage. "You're going to pay for what you did that night." "Am I?" Drake asked quietly. "Before you pull that trigger, Miss Ashford, perhaps you should know the truth about what happened to your ship." "I know what happened. I was there." "Were you?" His voice was gentle now, almost sad. "Or were you unconscious in the water when the real truth revealed itself?" Helena's hand trembled slightly, but her aim never wavered. "What are you talking about?" Drake gestured toward his cabin. "There are things you need to see. Documents that will change everything you think you know about that night." "I'm not falling for your tricks, pirate." "No tricks," he said simply. "Just truth. But if you prefer to shoot me in ignorance, I won't stop you. I've been carrying the weight of that night for 5 years too." Something in his voice, a note of genuine pain that seemed too real to be feigned, made Helena hesitate. She had imagined this moment countless times, but never like this. Where was the cruel laughter she had expected? Where was the cold indifference of a heartless killer? 5 minutes, she said finally, her pistol still trained on him. "Then I finish what I came here to do." Drake nodded solemnly. 5 minutes to change both our lives forever. Captain Drake's cabin was nothing like Helena had expected. Instead of the crude den of a savage pirate, she found herself in what could only be described as a scholar's study that happened to be at sea. Books lined the walls and carefully secured shelves, nautical charts covered a large oak table, and scientific instruments gleamed in their cases. The air smelled of leather, ink, and something else. Lavender. Helena's heart nearly stopped when she recognized the scent. It was her mother's favorite perfume, a fragrance she thought she'd never encounter again. "Sit," Drake said, gesturing to a chair upholstered in rich burgundy velvet. His voice carried an authority that was difficult to resist, but Helena remained standing, her pistol still trained on his chest. "I'll stand, thank you, and you'll keep your distance." Drake nodded, moving to a locked chest near his desk. Helena tensed, ready to fire, but he only withdrew a leather portfolio bound with ribbon. The ribbon was blue silk, the same shade as the Ashford Shipping Company colors. "Your father was not just a merchant, Miss Ashford," Drake began, his voice low and measured. "He was also a courier for the American government carrying sensitive documents between Charleston and European allies. The cargo manifest you saw listed cotton and tobacco, but there was something else hidden in the Seraphina's hold that night." Helena's pistol wavered slightly. You're lying. Am I? Drake opened the portfolio and withdrew a document bearing official seals. This is a letter from the Secretary of State, authorizing your father to transport diplomatic correspondence of the highest importance. France and Britain were on the verge of a new conflict, and American interests hung in the balance. Helena's mind reeled. Her father had never mentioned anything about government work, but as she looked at the official seals and signatures, she felt the first crack in the foundation of her certainty. Even if that's true, it doesn't excuse what you did. No, Drake agreed quietly, but it explains why your ship was targeted. The storm was real, Miss Ashford, but my attack was not random piracy. I was hired by British agents to intercept those documents and ensure they never reached their destination. The admission hit Helena like a physical blow. She had imagined many scenarios over the years, but the idea that her family's destruction had been calculated, political, made it somehow worse. So you admit it. You murdered innocent people for money. Drake's jaw tightened, and for the first time she saw real pain flicker across his features. I boarded your ship with orders to retrieve the documents and leave no witnesses. It was supposed to be quick, efficient. But when I saw you, he trailed off, turning to stare out the cabin's windows at the moonlit water. Helena waited, her heart hammering against her ribs, sensing that she was about to hear something that would change everything. You were trying to save that wounded sailor, Drake continued. In the middle of chaos and death with your own life hanging by a thread, you still showed compassion. It was unexpected. Helena remembered that moment, the terror, the desperation, the way she had pleaded for mercy even as her world crumbled around her. And yet you still sank my ship. No, Drake said simply, turning back to face her. I didn't. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Helena felt the world tilt beneath her feet, but she forced herself to remain steady. I saw you. Your crew attacked us, killed my men. My crew engaged yours, yes. Men died, and I carry the weight of those deaths. But Miss Ashford, the Seraphina was already taking on water before we ever reached her. The storm had cracked her hull in 3 places. She was going down whether we appeared or not. Helena's pistol began to shake in her hands. No, that's not. You're trying to confuse me. Drake reached into the portfolio again and withdrew what looked like a ship's log. This is the Seraphina's damage report, written in your own first mate's hand before my ship was even spotted. Would you like me to read it to you? Before Helena could respond, he began to recite from memory. Hull breach below the waterline, port side. Mainmast compromised. Taking on water faster than pumps can manage. Estimate 30 minutes before she goes under. He looked up at Helena, his ice-blue eyes filled with something that might have been regret. That report was written 20 minutes before my crew set foot on your deck. Helena's legs suddenly felt weak, and she sank into the chair she had refused earlier. The pistol remained in her hands, but it was no longer pointed at Drake. Instead, she stared at it as if she'd never seen the weapon before. Then why? She whispered. Why attack a ship that was already dying? Because I had a job to finish, Drake said, but his voice lacked conviction. The documents had to be retrieved, and British intelligence doesn't accept failure. If I had let your ship sink without confirming the cargo was destroyed, they would have killed you. They would have tried. Drake moved closer, his movements careful and deliberate. But that's not why I boarded your ship, Helena. The use of her first name sent a shock through her system. No one had spoken her name with such gentleness since her father's death. What do you mean? Drake knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. This close, she could see the network of scars across his hands, the weariness etched around his eyes, and something else, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his fearsome reputation. When I saw you in the water unconscious and slipping beneath the waves, I made a choice that went against everything I had been hired to do. I dove in after you. Helena's breath caught in her throat. What? You were dying, Helena. The cold, the storm, the injuries from falling debris. You had minutes at most. I pulled you from the water and got you to one of my boats. My ship's doctor worked for hours to save your life. The cabin seemed to spin around Helena as fragmented memories surfaced, gentle hands tending her wounds, a warm voice speaking soothing words she couldn't quite make out, the scent of medicinal herbs and lavender, always lavender. The perfume, she breathed. Drake's expression grew even more pained. I found a bottle in your cabin before the ship went down. It seemed important, personal. I thought you might want it when you woke up. Helena's pistol clattered to the floor as the full weight of revelation crashed over her. You saved me. I tried to. But when you finally regained consciousness 3 days later, you were different. The fever had taken some of your memories, and what remained was filled with rage and grief. You tried to kill me the moment you were strong enough to hold a blade. Flashes of memory came back to her now. Lying in a narrow bunk, the gentle rocking of a ship, a tall figure silhouetted against lamplight. She had assumed it was all a fever dream, her mind's way of coping with trauma. But now, I had to make a choice, Drake continued. Keep you prisoner on my ship, knowing you would never stop trying to escape or kill me, or let you go and hope that time would heal the wounds I had helped create. So you abandoned me. Helena's voice was barely audible. I took you to a coastal town in Virginia and left you in the care of a doctor's family. I also left enough gold to ensure you would want for nothing. I hoped you would build a new life, find peace. Helena laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the intimate space of the cabin. Peace? I spent 5 years learning to fight, to track, to kill, all so I could find you and make you pay for destroying my life. And I've spent 5 years knowing that the one person I saved hated me more than anyone I'd ever killed. Drake stood slowly, moving to his desk where he poured 2 glasses of what looked like expensive brandy. We make quite a pair, don't we? Helena stared at him, this man who had been the villain of her nightmares for so long. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling, leaving her adrift in a sea of confusion and conflicting emotions. Why are you telling me this now? Why not let me kill you and be done with it? Drake handed her one of the glasses, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through her system. Because I'm tired of running from the past. And because... He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. Because in 5 years of sailing these waters, fighting battles and taking ships, I've never been able to forget the woman who showed mercy in the midst of chaos. The woman who made me question everything I thought I knew about honor and duty. Helena took a shaky sip of the brandy, feeling its warmth spread through her chest. The British agents who hired you, are they still a threat? Dead, Drake said simply. All of them. I made sure of that 3 years ago when I learned they had put a price on your head as well. Apparently, leaving witnesses, even rescued ones, was considered a liability. The revelation that Drake had eliminated threats to her safety while she had been hunting him was almost too much to process. Helena set down her glass and buried her face in her hands, trying to sort through the chaos of her emotions. I don't know what to believe anymore, she whispered. Drake's voice was gentle when he spoke again. Believe this. You are alive, and you are stronger than anyone who tried to destroy you. What you choose to do with that life is entirely up to you. Helena looked up to find him watching her with an expression of such careful hope that it made her chest ache. And what about you? What do you choose to do? I choose to stop running, he said quietly. From my past, from my mistakes, and from the one person whose forgiveness I want more than anything else in this world. The admission hung between them, heavy with possibility and danger in equal measure. Helena felt herself standing at a crossroads, with the path of vengeance she had followed for 5 years stretching behind her, and an uncertain but suddenly appealing future opening before her. I need time, she said finally, to think, to understand what all this means. Drake nodded, moving toward the cabin door. You're welcome to stay aboard the Nemesis as long as you need. Your word that you won't try to kill me in my sleep would be appreciated, but I understand if you can't give it yet. Helena almost smiled at that. I think my killing days might be behind me, Captain Drake. Just Drake, he said, pausing at the threshold. And Helena, thank you for listening. As the door closed behind him, Helena was left alone with her thoughts, a half-empty glass of brandy, and the overwhelming realization that the man she had sworn to kill might actually be the man who had given her a reason to live. 3 weeks aboard the Nemesis had transformed Helena's understanding of everything she thought she knew about pirates, about Drake, and most importantly, about herself. The ship that she had once seen as a vessel of destruction revealed itself to be something far more complex, a sanctuary for men who had nowhere else to go, led by a captain whose moral code was stricter than most of the honorable merchants she had known in her former life. Drake's crew was an eclectic mix of former slaves seeking freedom, sailors abandoned by cruel captains, and men who had simply grown tired of a world that offered them nothing but hardship. They treated Helena with a respect that bordered on reverence, partly because of Drake's obvious protection, but mostly because she had earned it by working alongside them, learning their trades, and listening to their stories without judgment. The morning sun painted the Carolina coast in shades of gold and amber as Helena stood at the ship's bow, watching dolphins race through the waves. Her appearance had changed again over these weeks. Gone was the hard edge of the revenge-seeking hunter, replaced by something softer, but no less strong. She wore simple sailor's clothes now, her golden hair braided back in a practical style, and her hands bore the honest calluses of shipboard work. "Regrets?" Drake's voice came from behind her, warm and familiar. Helena turned to find him watching her with those ice-blue eyes that no longer seemed cold, but rather like clear winter skies after a storm has passed. Over the past weeks, she had learned to read the subtle expressions that played across his features, the way his mouth curved when he was amused, how his jaw tightened when he was worried, the particular intensity of his gaze when he looked at her and thought she wasn't watching. "Surprisingly few," she replied honestly, "though I still struggle with how much of my life was built on a lie." Drake moved to stand beside her at the rail, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Not a lie. You did lose everything that night, and you did survive against impossible odds. The fact that your enemy turned out to be more complicated than you imagined doesn't diminish your strength." Helena considered this, watching the endless expanse of ocean stretch toward the horizon. "What happens now, Drake? I can't go back to Charleston. That life died with the Serafina, but I'm not sure I know how to be anything other than what I've become." "And what have you become?" he asked softly. Helena looked at him, really looked, taking in the scars that mapped his journey through a dangerous world, the strength in his hands that had both taken lives and saved hers, the eyes that held depths she was only beginning to explore. Someone who understands that the world isn't divided into heroes and villains. Someone who knows that sometimes the greatest courage is choosing to forgive rather than to fight. Drake's breath caught slightly at her words. Over the weeks, they had danced around the growing connection between them, neither quite brave enough to name what was happening. But Helena was tired of being afraid. "I have a confession," she continued, turning to face him fully. "I haven't thought about revenge in over a week. Instead, I find myself thinking about what it would be like to sail these waters not as a passenger, but as a partner." The hope that flared in Drake's eyes was almost blinding in its intensity. "Helena, I know it's complicated." She rushed on before she could lose her nerve. "I know that what we're feeling challenges everything that should be possible between us. But these weeks have shown me that you're not the monster I imagined. You're a man who takes in strays and protects the vulnerable, who risks everything to keep his crew safe, who carries the weight of past mistakes with more grace than most carry their victories." Drake reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. "I fell in love with your courage the night I pulled you from the storm," he whispered. "But I fell in love with your heart during these past weeks, watching you choose compassion over hatred, understanding over judgment." Helena's pulse quickened at his words, at the raw honesty in his voice. "And I fell in love with the man who saved me twice, once from drowning, and once from drowning in my own rage. When their lips met, it was with the desperate tenderness of two people who had found something precious they had never expected to discover. The kiss tasted of salt air and new beginnings, of storms weathered and calm seas ahead. Helena felt something inside her chest finally settle into place, like a ship finding its anchor in safe harbor. "Marry me," Drake said against her lips, his voice rough with emotion. "Not because it makes sense, not because it's expected, but because I cannot imagine sailing these waters without you beside me." Helena laughed, the sound bright with joy and disbelief. "Are you proposing to me on a pirate ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean?" "I'm proposing to you on our ship, wherever in the world we happen to be," Drake corrected, his smile transforming his entire face. "Though if you prefer, we could sail to Charleston and have a proper ceremony in a church." "No," Helena said firmly, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Let the sea be our chapel and the sky our witness. I've had enough of proper society's rules and expectations. If I'm going to marry a pirate captain, we'll do it properly, with no one's permission but our own." Drake's crew had gathered around them during their conversation, and now they erupted in cheers and applause. Apparently, their feelings for each other had been less secret than they had imagined. Someone produced a bottle of fine rum, and someone else began playing a lively tune on a worn fiddle. Captain Thompson, Drake called to his first mate, a grizzled man with kind eyes and hands gentle enough to mend sails or tend wounds. You've authority to perform marriages at sea, don't you? Aye, Captain, Thompson replied with a grin that split his weathered face. Been waiting weeks for you two to figure out what the rest of us could see plain as day. As the sun reached its zenith, Helena found herself standing before the assembled crew of the Nemesis, her hand clasped in Drake's, speaking vows she made up as she went along. There were no family witnesses, no elaborate decorations, no expensive gown, just two people who had found love in the aftermath of destruction, promising to face whatever storms lay ahead together. I promise to sail beside you through calm seas and tempests alike, Helena said, her voice carrying clearly across the deck. To trust in your strength when mine falters, and to lend you mine when yours grows weary. I promise to choose love over fear, understanding over judgment, and to never stop fighting for the life we're building together. Drake's vows were simpler but no less profound. I promise to protect not just your life but your dreams, your freedom, and your right to be exactly who you choose to be. I promise to be worthy of the forgiveness you've given me, and to spend every day earning the love you've offered. Most of all, I promise that wherever our ship sails, you will always be home. When Captain Thompson pronounced them married, the crew's celebration could probably be heard on the mainland. But Helena was aware only of Drake's hands in hers, of the promise in his eyes, and of the incredible lightness in her chest, where the weight of revenge had lived for so long. As evening painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Helena stood in the captain's cabin, their cabin now, watching Drake plot their course for the days ahead. The chart spread across his desk showed dozens of possible destinations, hidden coves in the Caribbean, bustling ports along the American coast, unexplored waters that beckoned with the promise of adventure. Where shall we go first, Mrs. Drake? He asked, looking up from the charts with a smile that still made her heart skip. Helena considered the question, thinking of all the places she had dreamed of seeing during her years of comfortable captivity in Charleston's drawing rooms. Then she looked at the man who had become her partner in every sense of the word, and realized that the destination mattered far less than the journey. Wherever the wind takes us, she said, moving to stand beside him. As long as we sail together. Drake wrapped his arms around her, pulling her back against his chest as they looked out at the endless ocean. The Nemesis cut through the waves with purpose, carrying them toward a future that neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed in storm and violence. Helena had set out to kill a pirate and ended up marrying him instead. It was, she reflected with a smile, probably the best change of plans she had ever made. Behind them, their past lay buried beneath the waves. Ahead, the horizon promised adventures limited only by their courage to pursue them. The woman who had once sworn vengeance had found something far more powerful, love that could transform enemies into soulmates, and turn the vast, dangerous ocean into home. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Helena knew that every storm she had weathered, every hardship she had endured had been worth it for this moment, this man, this life they would build together on the endless sea. The Nemesis sailed on through the night, carrying its captain and his bride toward whatever tomorrow might bring, their hearts finally at peace with the past and filled with hope for the future that stretched before them like an uncharted ocean waiting to be explored.